Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live. And I'm Bill Stone. And tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we will have, as usual, the weekly current Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics for where I live. We'll talk about a variety of different current events, subject to some time, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I'll have a brief review of Superman and Lois, Star Trek Lower Decks, What If, a little, because we don't talk about that genocidal mouse, and Stargirl. And, frankly, anything else you want to talk about. This is a good night for it. Bring up anything. This is, of course, a live stream, so you're free to talk with me about anything that you want in chat. You can ask me about any question, political, social, the virus whose name I can't risk saying without causing the video to be banned over on the YouTube side, United States Civil War II, or even things, it might be a good night tonight to do that too, pertaining to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I am happy to answer every question in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There are, of course, some questions that are be off limits, but pretty much anything else is fair game. I will get to as many of my viewers as possible with the understanding that this stream could be shorter than usual. I'm definitely not going to go 3 hours in this chair. Regular viewers will know that I was gone the last 2 weeks in a row. Oh, that was so much fun. Before I went to hell, I had a real serious nasty thing happen to my sciatic nerve because I'm old. And it was just really bit me. I went back and I did, I think, a week in a chair. And that was a bad idea. As it turned out, I could just barely do it. And then I went and I did something stupid the week after that. I drove for 6 hours on a Monday, and that caused it all to just go backwards. So that Thursday was out. And then last week, I probably could have done it. The thing was, having had it go backwards on me 1 week, I didn't want to sit here, get wound up in this chair for 2.5 hours and have the whole damn thing go backwards on me again. So that's all that happened there. I mean, just looking real quick at my various statistics over on the bitrate 20. Okay, it wants my audio bitrate to be higher. Well, isn't that fun? I will change that when I'm done for next time. So as we wait for some people to wander in, as always, we will answer the question that nobody asked. What are this week's virus statistics for Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live? Now, as always, I do source this. It's in my description box. You can find a link to the website. It's the City of Lincoln, Lancaster County, Nebraska Health Department. It's a really cool little website to go to, even if you're not interested in numbers for the this particular state or anything. Go to that website and have a look around, because you will see a state that is doing this right. I have gone to get statistics for other cities, other counties, other states, and some of them just really suck. This is a website that's done right, so yay for them. Excuse me, I'll get rid of a couple of things. Anyway, definitely check that out. It's not a bad website at all. You will notice, however, that my statistics, the one that I use, are a little bit different than the City of Lincoln, Lancaster County Health Department. And that's because my statistics for the county's population are a little larger. That's because the City of Lincoln, Lancaster County Health Department is going off of the 2010 population statistic from the 2010 census. The problem with that is, in 20 years more actually, 25 years or so between I lived here and grew up here and then moved back here, the city doubled in size. 150,000 to 324,000, something like that. So you can't expect the 2010 census to be the same as the 2020, which we don't know the numbers for yet. So I go to a site that has the estimate of our current population, so it's a little higher. Hey, Dalton, nice to see you here this week as well. Thank you very much for being here. Anyway, my statistics are a little bit more accurate because of that. Gah. Just poured Dr. Pepper onto my vest. Oh, no. So these statistics, in fact, are that the total Lancaster County population remains about the same at 324,216. Total number of Lancaster County virus deaths is now up to 253. This does, in fact, that's up 11. It does represent a significant uptick from when I did this 3 weeks ago. Now, I haven't sat down to look through on a week-by-week basis, so I don't know exactly when or what these happened. But for a number of weeks, we were trending at 0 or 1 per week. So this is a significant uptick. It's not as big an uptick as we had on Christmas, which for some bizarre reason, the number of cases and deaths went up. Deaths went up by a good 10 in a 24-hour period. It was Christmas Day. It was so bizarre. I thought we had a bit of a Christmas miracle, but it turned out we didn't. Anyway, this is an uptick. I don't know what to base this on. I don't know what's causing it. I don't think anybody knows what's causing it. There's no research done as to what's causing it. I can't tell if it's something having to do with this new deadly Delta variant that we've got going on, because City of Lincoln, Lancaster County doesn't give out those numbers. It's one of the few they don't give out, is what are the cases that we're having that are of the variants, and how many deaths of those cases are from the variants. And it would also be nice to know, what do the statistics look like for people dying who have had the vaccine? But those are not things that they're keeping right now, and I wish they would. Even though we did have a significant uptick to 253, I do always like to draw the comparison of the number of people who died of heart disease in 2019 alone, which was 485, which means that given more than a year and a half, going into a year and 2/3, of the number of people who died of the virus is slightly more than half the number of people who died of heart disease in 1 year alone. So if we can call the virus a pandemic in Lincoln, Nebraska, then we can only classify heart disease as an ongoing health disaster. We need to get FEMA in here real quick. Total number of Lancaster County confirmed cases is now at 33,866, which is up 1,710 from 3 weeks ago. That is a significant uptick in the number of positive cases. Again, no idea what to put this down to. Is it the variants? We don't know. Is there something else going on? We don't know. The only thing I know for sure is that people who have been vaccinated are now painting those of us who have not as an enemy of civilization to be brought down. I'm hearing more of that. My last stream was about how we're going to a really dark place. I will talk about more of that, but this is a significant uptick. I do not know what it is that you put that down to. However, the number of positive cases classified as recovered is now through to 31,175, which was up 121 from last time. Anytime this number goes up, it's a good number. It means more people have recovered. Unfortunately, I don't know what this classification actually means. Did they recover completely? Did they recover with some level of disability? How long did they have the disability? Is it permanent? We don't know these things. So given that there are only 253 deaths, and if you run the math, I'm guessing that there are actually some 2,438 people who are stuck in some kind of Schrodinger's cat-style limbo as both dead and simultaneously not dead. The total number of vaccinations completed is now at 177,614, up 3,002 from 2 weeks to 3 weeks ago. That makes the percentage of the population that's been vaccinated at 54.783%, up 1.408% from 3 weeks ago. This is essentially leveled off to nothing. The upticks we're seeing are not important with respect to our population. It had a big surge and then went way down. Deaths as a percentage of the confirmed cases is 0.753%, up 0.006% from 3 weeks ago. Statistically, just identical. The amounts of increase we're seeing are really statistically insignificant. Deaths as a percentage of the population is now at 0.780%, up 0.0034% from last week. Statistically, this number has been damn near identical since the pandemic started. There's been no real change. I would have to say, just looking at the numbers, and if you really want to see it in action, go to the website and have a look at the charts. Really, this is not an issue. And I would have to say that if you look at where the vaccine started being administered and all that, you're going to see that we didn't have any change due to the vaccine. And now that we've got 54% of our population vaccinated, we're getting an increase. It doesn't make logical sense. If you got more than half of your population completely vaccinated, compared to when you didn't, you should see downticks, not upticks. Go figure. I don't. Interesting bit of statistic here that I'd been catching, and I wanted to bring it up just because I find the numbers so enormous. The total number of individuals, that's individual human beings, not the number of tests given out, but the number of individual human beings who have been tested, is at 201,724. That is more than half of our population. I find that number weird, but that is the total number of discrete scalar individuals who have been tested in Lancaster County. That number is, by the way, up 6,364 from last week. Now, if you just do, just a little math, a little simple math, and you take the number of people who have been tested versus the number of tests that have been given out, you find out that statistically, each individual who's been tested would have gotten 3 tests each. And of course, that doesn't actually happen. That's just an average. But for that to work out, that means some people got 2 tests. Because if you get one test, and it comes back positive, you're going to go, oh crap, I want a second one, right? So almost everybody in that group had 2 tests at least, right? And so then you're looking at people who would have had to have, in order to get that as just a average, some people would have to have 8 tests. And some people 2, and it would be all over the place. But the number of tests the individuals will have is amazing. Average of 3 times. Dalton Brazier is saying they'll use an uptick as an excuse to push kids getting vaxxed. I have no doubt that will happen. I don't know what they're going to do with us here locally. When you look at the statistics, while it is an uptick from where we were going straight down to nothing, statistically, it's still not a significant part of our population. Hey, Jeanette, nice to see you as well. Thank you very much. Glad that you're back as well for whatever time you can spare. I just gave out the numbers. We're up to 253 deaths, which is a lot more than I'd like to see. But at least it wasn't the Christmas massacre where we had, I don't even remember, 40 added to the list all of a sudden. Anyway, those other ones, those specific new individuals, give us an opportunity to do some interesting math. That was up. New people from the last time that I had counted this was up 6,364. But if you take the difference in terms of the number of tests that were administered, you find out that each of these newly tested individuals would have had an average of 4.9 tests per person. Out of those 6,364, each of them would have almost 5 tests on average. 5. Now, to get that to work out, obviously, again, you're going to have some people that have 2 tests. You're going to have some people that have 5. Apparently, you're going to have some that have 8 or 9 to bring that down to a nice, even 5 tests as an average. That's astonishing to me, and I have to wonder what the hell is happening there. It's weird. It's definitely weird. So that is our new fun for our new statistics here in Lancaster County. So that said, I do have a little to talk about in terms of politics, some current events. First thing, you can't stop, and again, because of the way that this works out and everything, a lot of this is more off the cuff than it ordinarily would be. I don't really have any notes for anything because I just don't know how long my back is going to keep up with me. So you can't get away without talking about the Afghan withdrawal. Now, I don't want to say anything at all about the war. I have very specific opinions about it, but I don't want to say anything about that per se. I am looking at this withdrawal, right? Doesn't matter which side you fall on this one. There was no way that the United States was going to have a war there forever. And 20 years is a very long time indeed. That is a long damned time. It is too long to expect the average member of the populace to support it. It's too long. It's too close. It's an entire generation. An entire generation of children grew up knowing nothing but war with that country. It was too long. It was never going to be supported forever. That was never going to happen. So from my perspective, if you're going to go into a war like that, regardless of what the war is, you have to have to yourself some stated goals, some objectives, metrics by which you can say, okay, we established this goal, we met that goal, we met this goal, we have met all the goals, we have won. What were those goals in Afghanistan? Can anybody tell me? Because I've never heard them. I've never heard what those goals specifically were so that we would know when we had won. Without those goals, you wind up with a war that lasts forever. And the public, no populace will ever support a war that is going on forever. They will not do it. Martha's saying the war was over in 2004. That wasn't a war. That was it was nation building. And that was the problem. Yeah, well, that's what's really going on here. That's what's really going on here is nation building in this particular case. And there's simply no way that the public was ever going to support that going on forever. 20 years. 20 freaking years. We have been in that country to some extent or another, sometimes much longer periods of time. Now, I have guys who I taught when I was teaching at the place that shall not be named, who were veterans of Afghanistan at that time. It was 2010, 12 years, 11 or 12 years. And they had some very hard feelings about that because at that point, President Obama had started scaling things back, and they felt like it was, seeing their buddies die for nothing. And I get that. I totally get that. If you're somebody who has fought those wars, you have seen your friends die next to you, I totally get where you're coming from. But you have to look at it outside of that prism. Oh, good night, Bill. Good night, Jeanette. I'm glad to have you as long as you can. And yes, Jeanette says if you one or two of you haven't given Bill a thumbs up yet, do like, sub, hit the notification bell, share me on social media. Anyway, as I'm saying, regardless of what you guys, and I totally get where you're coming from. I totally understand that this totally feels like betrayal. I get that. And on that level, if I was in there in the trenches with you, I would agree with you. I mean, I still do agree with you that when you have people getting killed, you want to make your objectives and win the war. But there were none. And so because of that, the war went on forever. And after an entire generation of children who grew up knowing nothing but warfare with that country, somebody finally said, that's enough. And that person happened to be Joe Biden, who is not the most, Joe Biden. Guy's lost his mind. I don't know that you could have done an evacuation like this and have it work out any way other than it did. If you're going to say, okay, we're out of the base in the dead of night, which is what happened in one case. We're out of the base dead of night. We're just taking off and leaving, no warning. If you're going to do that, this is what you're going to get. Just look at Vietnam. When that war ended, the evacuation of Saigon was a well-known damn bloodbath. If you didn't make it on a plane, there was some good chance you were going to die. And for a long time after that, probably 2 decades after that, a lot of people came to the U.S. shores, a lot of Vietnamese came to the United States, such that we would call them here boat people. And there were so many of them. And a lot of them, by the way, settled in this part of the country in the upper Great Plains. When I was working for a cookie company, a very large cookie company in North Sioux City, South Dakota. When I was working for them, we got in trouble. We got dinged by, I've forgotten which federal agency it is that oversees that sort of thing. We got dinged from that because we didn't have enough black people living there. We had an enormous number of Vietnamese people working there, and it was consistent with the actual makeup of that town. The Sioux City metro area, a lot of white people, a fair amount of Vietnamese, and then black people, and then Hispanic, and you get into some of the smaller ones. It's not a huge number, but it's noticeable enough. And as I say, we got dinged by some federal commission. They had to pay a fine because they didn't have X number of black people working there. And so what they ended up having to do, by the way, was fire some of the Vietnamese so that they can hire some black people if they can find them. But anyhow, I just look at what's going on now, and I look at the fall of Saigon, and I'm like, well, if you're going to do it this way, this is what's going to happen. Are there better ways to do it? Probably, but if you're going to do it this way, this is what's going to happen. Marshall's saying, of course, you could extradite much cleaner than this. Oh, absolutely. We have teams of people who specialize in this. They were ignored by the current administration. Yeah. To me, it's just more evidence of Joe Biden's incompetence or the incompetence of the people around him. Whomever came up with the way of doing this was a bad idea. It means that their history has completely failed them. And unfortunately, I know your history has completely failed you if you were educated in the United States from my generation on, at least. What I learned about history, I had to augment my history by reading it long after I was out of school. And there's still lots of places in the world that I don't know the history for. But if I looked at, the fall of Saigon and what happened there and the way that they pulled out, it was just running and screaming, and it was a massacre. If you're going to do that again, if you have not looked at your history to see how an evacuation of that kind, a surrender of that kind works, then you're going to get exactly what we had. You're going to get exactly what we had. And you cannot expect it to have been anything other. I assume that somebody in the Biden administration knows just enough history to know that this was going to be a debacle of enormous proportions. But I guess they just don't care. I guess they just wanted people out of there, which is weird to me because it seems to me like this is something that's going to play very badly in the midterm elections. I don't know. We do have a very successful propaganda machine with our free press. But it looks like something that could bite you, but apparently they don't think it's going to. Or somebody would have said, Joe, we can't do it like that. It'll just wind up with a lot of people dead. It's going to look like the fall of Saigon again. And somebody just said, we don't care. And apparently somebody said, it's going to ding our numbers. We're going to keep control of the House and the Senate. It's going to be fine. We'll get control of it. It doesn't matter. Nobody will ever bring this up in any elections. I don't know what's going on in their brains. Marshall is saying, Rule 1, extract U.S. citizens. Rule 2, evacuate allies. Rule 3, destroy sensitive equipment. Rule 4, destroy any fortification that may be used against the remaining people. Rule 6, evac superfluous troops. Rule number 5, there is no rule number 5. Yes, it could have been done like that, but instead they just said, screw it. We don't care. We don't know our history. We haven't looked at the history of any other country that's had to, make a retreat out of the country because it all works out the same. It always works out the same. If you don't do the steps that Marshall talked about, if you don't do that, then you're going to get exactly what we got. So, my suggestion going forward is the same one it's been for 20 years. Don't have wars on nouns. Have wars on places or people. When you have a war on a noun, you don't have any kind of goals set. You will never win a war on a noun. The war on drugs has been going on, the vast majority of it, well, it's been inside my lifetime, really. What they call the war on drugs is inside of my lifetime. Have we made the slightest impact, really? Because I don't think we have. Speed, that was what amphetamines used to be. But in the 1970s, speed was on its way out because all of the people that had taken it freaking died. Now, because all the people who took it died and it took a generation or so for it to come back, we're seeing it again in the form of meth. Have we really made the slightest inroads? I mean, I'd have to take a look at the statistics, but I mean, really, what has the war on drugs done? Not a damn thing. But you can't have a war on a noun. You can't have a war on poverty. They've been having a war on poverty since before I was born. Stated war on poverty. What has it done? Well, if we handed out every poor individual from the 1960s when it started, if we handed them out $5 million each, we would spend far less than we've already spent. You can't win a war on a noun. War on terrorism, right? Okay, what are the specific goals on that? This one, in Afghanistan, you say, okay, that's part of the war on terrorism. Fine, I'm willing to consider war on terrorism something like the Cold War, where you don't have any battles fought, but a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes. So I'm willing to believe that. But you got to say, okay, these are your goals in this particular battle in that war. And if you don't, you wind up with a war on a noun, a war on terror. You're never going to win it. You will never win it. It will only result in more and more restrictions as little pieces, parts get abused and people fall through a security crack, which wouldn't be difficult or anything. But they fall through a security crack, and what do? So, in the future, those of you who are in the military, those of you who have served in the military, just take note. When you go in, get it to be a war on a country or a war on a people, and know what your actual goals are. And it can't run this long. It just can't. You will never have the support of everyone in the country after a generation. It's just not going to go there. And a generation in which, because we had no goals stated, it looks like we never did the slightest lick of good. Now, I'm sure that we did. I'm not going to say anything about conditions on the ground there. Ain't never been there, and I don't trust the press to tell me correctly. So, I don't remember where I was going with it, but, I just look at it, and this is something where you, if you're a soldier, if you're in the military, always have a war on people, whether it's a country or a group of people. You always have a war on them, and you have goals. Total capitulation of the other country. There's a goal. We want total capitulation. We want them to surrender with no terms. That's our goal. Get them to surrender with no terms. Okay, fine. And then hand it over to the generals for them to figure out the best way to go about making sure that these guys will completely surrender with no terms. If you don't do that, then you get what we've got. And you will not carry support of everybody through generations worth of warfare. They won't do that. So this is what we have. Look to the future, those of you that are soldiers. Remember that this has now happened twice in American history. At the fall of Saigon and now here. The exact same thing is playing out for the exact same reasons. So you got to have goals. You have to know what you're fighting for, what are the goals that you're trying to achieve, and don't have a war on a noun. Excuse me. Other things I can talk about pretty easily. The new treating the unclean, like myself, as someone to be defeated. It's getting worse. It's getting significantly worse, at least on social media. Last time I was saying, okay, well, we can see where it's headed because, you had people in the press who were saying, people who have not been vaccinated should not receive, health care or not have access to their insurance or something like that. Put on the back burner if they need a hospital room, etc. And you had individuals who were saying that, maybe we should be taken off to a detention center. It's gotten way worse. way worse. On social media, it's now not at all unusual. And part of this is the left. Because I would hazard a guess that more people on the right have not had this vaccination than the people on the left. Well, the people on the left viscerally hate and detest the people on the right with every fiber of their being. So the notion that they're going to get rid of them somehow, so they're going to get back at them somehow for the last 4 years, this really appeals to them. It's really rather sick. You guys who are doing this, who are saying that people like myself need to be locked up, need to be taken away, and trust me, the next thing will be the goddamn gas chambers. Those of you who are saying that, I think you got to look back and look at yourself and say, why do I hate people this much? What is the source of my hatred? Why do I want these people dead? Because let's be real, if you're on the left, there's a good chance you want people dead. You need to take a step back and look at yourself and see what it is that you're doing. Are you really that kind of person that you want people dead? Are you really that kind of person? Because if you are, please come and say so I know who to be afraid of. Thank you. Yes, Marshall says the first victims of the Nazis were disabled and weak people. That is another thing that's going on about this whole thing. I assume that the only reason that we don't have to worry about that, at least in the short term, being carted off somewhere, is the optics. If you look at the stats, and it's real obvious when you look at the stats, you go to that website for the Lincoln Lancaster County site, flip over to one of the pages that's got the graphs, and look at the breakdown of people who have been vaccinated who are white versus everything else. It is astonishing. It's astonishing. There have got to be at least 30 times the number of white people have had this vaccination in Lancaster County than there are every other minority put together. If you could stack them on top of each other and it'd be this big, and the white people graph is like this big. So if you were going to actually haul people out, the optics would look very simple. It would look like you're hauling away black people and Hispanics and stuff like that. It would look like that's who you're hauling away. It would look like you're a racist. I think that's what stops this from getting done, is because anybody who does it looks at the stats and they go, this ain't going to look good, Joe. This ain't going to look good at all. Marshall says optics was defined by the press. Might want to rethink your stance. I don't know. I could be wrong that this is not going to happen immediately, but if you just look at it, I mean, if they tried this in Lincoln, if they tried carting all of us off, it would be, 10 white people and 150 or 100 blacks, Hispanics, etc., all stuck together in a boxcar. It's going to look like you're hauling away black people. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but, to me it looks like, okay, you're going to look like you're hauling away black people. Maybe you don't want to look like you're hauling away black people. Who knows? Maybe the press would go along with it and they would just suppress any pictures and video except of white people. But the number, at least in Lancaster County, it's orders of magnitude more. It's amazing. So there's that at least that maybe keeps it from being there. But when you look at them, and people have brought this up lots of times before, when you look at the same people who are in favor of having like vaccine passports the way that New York City's doing. New York City, I got to tell you something, man. In World War II, you guys sent a lot of pretty scrappy fighters out there. Today, look at you. You're pussies. People in New York City are cowards. It is just that simple. You should not be allowing this to happen. Anyhow, I don't remember where I was headed for this. As I say, I don't have any actual notes set up here. But one of the things that people have noticed, and I've certainly noticed too, and again, it doesn't matter where you are on, increased, voter ID and stuff like that. Doesn't matter where you are. You have to be able to see the incredible amount of hypocrisy. Here is, in general, the left screaming that we need these passports so that we can get this under control from the evil right who haven't had their vaccines. And when you, where was I going after the vaccine passports? Oh, yeah. So they will scream about that. You need IDs and you need passports just to get around in New York City, just to do normal stuff in New York City that you didn't have to do 3 weeks ago. Now you have to have a passport for it, right? But at the same time, they're totally against getting ID for voting. I don't matter where you come down on that one. You got to notice that hypocrisy, and I'm amazed that the left doesn't notice it, right? If you're saying that we have to have this in order to make sure that we have fewer infections, then don't you want the same thing for voting so we can make sure we only get citizens? It's an amazing bit of hypocrisy on their part. Mask orders are starting to get weird and difficult to understand. For all the world, it looks like the president has sent out some kind of mask order to all 50 states, but of course that's not true. So I'm seeing people in my city running around not sure whether or not they're supposed to wear anything. This is, as always, up to your local government. Find out there. I don't know what your status is. Mine is we don't have a mask order yet. Give that those charts time to go up very far, and we might. But we were in a position, see, we're not cowards. We were in a position where we were about to go out and tar and feather the mayor. It was real bad for her. I'm amazed that she got reelected. So there'll be real pushback, I think. It really all depends on what the cops will do. If the cops decide that they're going to actively enforce a mask order law, it'll be kind of problematic. If they're not, if they're just going to turn and look the other way, then we'll probably be pretty successful in not having a mask order. People here are pretty fed up. I happen to be talking to a friend of mine in Des Moines. They're in a very similar situation we are. Statistically, things work out about the same for them. And he was saying that even his friends on the left, the ones who are really, really in favor of the vaccine and all that, they're fed up. He himself that day was on his way to some big concert where they were saying, "Oh, super spreader event," and even the people who are seriously wanting some kind of force everyone to have a vaccine, even those guys were going to say, "Screw you, we're going to the concert." Dalton says, quote, "Starting to get weird. Come on, Bill, it's never made any sense." Oh, it hasn't made any sense. No, it hasn't. None of this has made any sense. I mean, what it really was, again, somebody libertarian, don't care about either party particularly. All it looked like to me was a concerted attempt to get Trump out of office. Everything they'd tried for the last 4 years, all of the incredible propaganda and all that, went nowhere, went absolutely nowhere. So what they were trying to do was get everyone to believe that this pandemic was Trump's fault. And they convinced those Americans who had already gone mentally ill from their seething hatred of the right for the last 4 years, they got them to believe it, and they got a fair percentage of the world to believe it. So that's the only reason I think that this has even been an issue. If it was not something where the press could grab it and blow it all out of proportion, I don't think anybody would have freaking noticed. They say, okay, make sure you get your flu vaccine this year. Got a particularly virulent strain of the flu. That would be all. That would be it. It's really the only reason it makes sense. And if they hadn't done that, if they hadn't had that last minute, lengthy round of trying to make Trump look bad, I think he probably would have handily won. I don't think there would have been any question about it. Regardless of what may or may not have gone on with ballots, I do think he would have handily won had the press not successfully convinced a majority of the American public that he was personally to blame for the virus. Marshall says it all comes down to power dynamics, everything. The left wants power and will stop at nothing to get it. I think it's the left and the right, to be honest. Right now, the left is looking really bad to me, worse than the right has looked for some time. But give them time, and it'll be back to the usual bickering about who gets to do what, which has been going on more than my entire life. I always say politicians are power-mad, sociopathic narcissists. Look up the definition of those terms. You will see them right there. I don't think there's anything unusual about that, but you're right, it all comes down to power. In this case, it came down to having lost their minds, literally become mentally ill as a result of going bat guano crazy about President Trump. It never made any sense, and except that the press is actively helping to get the President of the United States voted out. It's the only thing that makes any sense. Marshall says, I'm right, the right does too, but you were referring to the recent election shenanigans. Yes, again, I don't know what happened with the actual votes, and I don't want to say that I do. Anybody that I've looked at has not had hands on any of the voting machines, which means they don't really know. So I don't want to say one way or the other, because I certainly see many, many possible attack vectors that were not present in prior elections that were present in this one. And I would have to assume that they were taken advantage of. I don't know that. But in any case, yes, in terms of the last election, it was all a power thing. How can we get Trump out of power? And, whoever, they didn't even care, clearly, who the guy that they or girl that they got to actually do it was. Clearly didn't care at all. Poor Joe Biden. The only thing that's that I found interesting about this whole problem with Afghan withdrawal is that I watched, I don't remember which interview it was, but it was one where the press to some extent seems to be done doing nothing but softball questions. They're still never going to bring up the fact that Biden clearly suffers from dementia. They're never going to bring that up. But they've done a little more hardball questions in some of their interviews. And they did one with Biden where they pushed back on how he's handling this retreat and withdrawal. And he actually sat there for a minute and a half or so and rattled off his argument in a coherent way. Again, don't have to fall either side of the argument to look at what he was saying and go, holy crap, that man actually held a cogent argument for about 2 minutes. A lot of the time when I've seen him out there, he's just whacked out of his mind, and comes up with the answers that don't make any sense, and he stammers and all of that. But he was not doing that here in this interview. And I was like, wow, that's weird. I wonder what's going on there. But anyway, this time around, it was just how can we get Trump out of office? And they had a lot of help with the press, and social media in particular helped, and that's why he lost the election. That's why we have the virus as even a thing. If it was, if it had been Hillary Clinton who had the presidency, we would never have heard about this. Not a peep. Marshall said he also said that was 5 days ago, as if it were ancient history. Sadly, for your average voter, 5 days ago is ancient history. So we have all that going on. Afghan withdrawal, which bleeds a little bit into the unclean and how they're thinking about treating us, which the only saving grace that I can see is there is so many black people who would be rounded up compared to the number of white people. You have to wonder if that won't play some part in their decision about what to do. Maybe they'll just wait until they've got black people heavily, far more gotten a vaccine than not. I don't even know why they haven't gotten it. I guess they just say, screw it, I don't care. So I don't know why, but because, it's totally free here in Lincoln, Nebraska. You can walk into any number of places. When they were giving them out in a big way, they took one of our big event centers and processed 4,000 or so people every day. So it's not like you can't get it. It's not like it isn't free. It's not like it isn't on the lips of every human being for the last year and a half. For some reason, that demographic has chosen not to get it. Be interested to hear what their rationale is, whether they're just scared of it because they know that in the past, black people haven't always done that well with government-run test programs of drugs. Maybe that's I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Let's see what time it is. It is 9:46, so I'm not quite at the hour mark. I'll try to get there pretty easily. Yeah, Marshall says, I wonder why black people don't trust the government. I wonder. Yeah. Yeah. They've not come out on the good side for a lot of those. So, I think I'm going to talk about some TV shows that have come out this week. Actually, for the last 2 weeks. I will mention that unlike other reviewers, I do not sit down and rehash the plot and tell you what I liked or didn't like. You will generally, not this time because of the way things are working and my back doesn't want to be in this position much longer than an hour, I can tell that already. I usually will go into a lot more depth than most YouTube reviewers. I usually try to touch on just about everything that goes into making a movie or a TV show. So we will have to read it, that, if you've come to this video knowing that I was going to have some kind of review for Superman and Lois, Lower Decks, what if, a little bit, and Stargirl, well, you knew that what you were getting into, or you don't care that it's spoiled for you, but in any case, we should probably issue a...
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. All hands, prepare for incoming spoilers.
Yes, it is a spoiler alert, and that is because I am a secret master of fandom. That means that the fandom is strong with me. This is neither a boast nor a brag, really. This is just where you find yourself after having watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. The problem with secret masters of fandom is that we are cursed. You just can't see all of this new stuff without seeing the century that came before. You discover there really isn't that much that's very original, and it often interferes with your ability to enjoy things. One thing I don't do is outrage reviews, because there are a lot of YouTube reviewers who are simply actors portraying outrage, because they discovered after The Last Jedi that outrage really sells. But unfortunately, they knee-jerk hate everything, and that's just because their viewers want to see them vicariously living through them hating something. And it causes a weird feedback loop between popular reviewers and fans to the point where ultimately nobody likes anything. But I don't do that. If I like something, I will say why in detail. If I dislike it, I'll say why in the detail. But unlike other reviewers, I do try to be the adult in this particular room. So, talking about some of the shows, my God, these things are coming out right on top of each other. We've got Superman that's just finished up, Superman and Lois, finished up the first season. Gonna have a second season, yay! Just finished up the first season. Right on top of that, Stargirl was starting out. Right over the end of that, in fact, it was so bizarre. I'm not used to watching television per se, and I still don't. I flip this open and turn on my Spectrum app that lets me get all the TV shows. But it's so weird for me, because I want to catch these live. I want to catch them as soon as they come out. It's so weird for me to be sitting and waiting for something to come on. And worse, when it's a 2-hour block when I'm watching it. That wouldn't have been nothing to me 10 years ago, but now it's weird. I don't like sitting and waiting for those. And I sure as hell don't like going through the commercials. There are so many commercials. I usually try to watch things at least once, twice, possibly 3 times if I'm doing a real in-depth review. Didn't do that with any of these, but I discovered that when I go back and I get on the high seas and I watch this stuff without the commercials, I like it a lot better. So Superman and Lois had 2 episodes while I was gone. They finished up their season at the end of this last episode this week on Tuesday night. Don't have a hell of a lot to say about that episode, except 2 things. It's continuing to overuse the trope that my wonderful viewer J. Marshall Presnell said. It is yet another Zod-like alien, or Yasla. It's based off of a Star Trek reference that we always used to say, yet another godlike alien, because it was a trope that Gene Roddenberry liked to use. But here with Superman, we find this happening a lot in the general franchise as we're getting into evil Superman. And apparently it's just, frankly, because I don't remember it being any kind of a big deal until Superman 2 in 1980, I think. That's when Zod became a big deal, and that's because Terrence Stamp's performance was so damn memorable. And only after that did Zod even become an issue. Apparently, it is the continued washout from having that one good movie in 1980, for God's sake. 40 years ago now? One good movie pushed Zod into this limelight, and he's been there ever since. And there's really no reason for it. He was never that big a deal in the comics. He certainly wasn't an arch villain for Superman. He was one of many from time to time that got out of the Phantom Zone. He wasn't the only one. He wasn't the first, and he certainly wasn't the last. There's really no reason to do these super-powered evil versions of Superman. There's really no reason for it at all. It is an overused trope. It was overused here, and it was overused twice, because several episodes ago it looked like that had all been taken care of, except we knew from behind the scenes it hadn't been. But still, you're reusing it twice, right? The same situation where you have these superpowered Kryptonians going out to try to take over the world, and Superman, and in this case Superman and friend, barely get it stopped, but they've done it a second time. Why? Why are we going through the exact same thing a second time? To me, it would have made more narrative sense to not have that big fight, 3 or 4 episodes ago, saved it up for the last couple of episodes, and had a really huge fight. If you're going to do it, narratively, where you've got an arc that covers an entire season, just save it all up for the end, guys. You've only got a limited budget on television. I can't imagine that the CW is paying, more money than God like they do in Star Trek. But, guys, save it up for the end. That would be my biggest thing. Save it up for the end. Don't do the same overused trope twice. And as my regular viewer from Down Under often points out, there's a lot of other things you can take from Superman's history. He loves Brainiac, and that would be a good one to do. At this point, Lex Luthor is actually overused. You shouldn't have him anymore for a while. Yet another Zod-like alien, overused, get rid of it, don't have him for a while. And in point of fact, Brainiac, as a foe for Superman, started in the Silver Age and continued all the way up through the modern age, and was much more of an actual arch-villain. His arch-villain, Superman's arch-villain for all time is Lex Luthor. But if you look at other bad guys, Zod is way down here on the list. And, Brainiac is much closer to, and you could do a good Brainiac story where he could conceivably beat Superman. If you've got the budget to do that sort of thing in a minor way twice, save up your budget and do it as a big way, as a finale for your season for Brainiac. That would be my suggestion. Go with Brainiac. Go with anybody. There's a ton of people. And his character's been around since 1938, for God's sake. You could have him going after crooked lobbyists like he did when he first appeared. There's all kinds of things you can do with that. So, no more Zod-like aliens, please. Next season, no more Zod-like aliens. No Lex Luthor. We don't need him. It's too overused now. It's just overused to death. Get Brainiac. What's another good one that you could do? Superman has so many people. I wouldn't want to get Mr. Mxyzptlk particularly as something that goes on for a whole season, because I think he's a funny villain, not really an evil one. You can go back through, I mean, Terra Man, for God's sake, there's one. You could make an entire season about, Clark losing his powers. That's happened 3 or 4 times during his history. Or better still, better than relying on any of this stuff, come up with something new like they did in the DC animated universe with Harley Quinn. Something that's kind of cool and takes off, have a little creative brain power rather than running off of somebody else's ideas that have been rehashed 50 times since they first happened in the Golden Age. Do something totally unique. Anyway, they still remain, and it's why the show has something of good space in my heart. They still remain kind to us. Those of us who live in largely urban or largely rural areas, despite the fact that we're all urban, it's still a lot of land area. So they've continued to be very kind to us. I've lived in towns smaller than what we see for Smallville. They're doing a very good job. They are being very, very kind to us. And one of the things I really liked seeing this episode, this last one, was the aftermath of it all and how the townspeople were helping each other. That may seem like something that's old and quaint and weird and never really happens in real life, but I'm here to tell you that it does. I have a particular incident from my own experience that will show this off. I was at, what was it? I don't remember the place right now. In the summer of 1989, I was working at a dinner theater that was along the Mississippi River. It was actually kind of a dinner stock theater company thing. It was a dinner theater for the patrons, but the rest of us, it was summer stock. Anyway, I was at this town. It was very small. It was, maybe a couple of thousand people, the whole town was. It was also a college town, so when college was in session, it was a totally different place. But for the summer that we had, it was a couple of thousand people. And we would mostly get retirees who were on their way somewhere else and would stop there on this, what looked like, it was kind of cool. It was an actual beached paddle boat. They pulled it up on the land and left it there, but it was an actual paddle boat. But one of the things about the paddle boat is it had 2 floors, right? It had one floor where if you were out in the house, you would, see balcony seating and stuff like that. And then the main floor, having turned it into a dinner theater, was a little bit different because you had tables around now rather than tons of chairs. But there were two levels. The first level was, the level on top was the kitchen area, right? All of the kitchen stuff, everything was up there on the first level. Second level was where you took it down to when you were, going to take out, because we did. Not only did we work, not only did we rehearse, we also, because it was summer stock, we got to do things like take all of the, china, all the glasses, all the silverware, and put those out on every single damn table every night. It was the last thing we did before you took off for a couple of hours and had to come back to get ready for a show. So, interesting thing about that was, I'm setting all that up in terms of the dishes because I want you to remember that. So we had this cart, right, that you would put, if you could possibly do it, you would shove every damn dish, glass, everything that you needed for that downstairs on that thing. And so you'd shove it all on this one cart, right? And put it in this elevator. Now this was it was a decent enough elevator. It was, sort of a freight elevator. It was used to, we put this stuff in there. People have been doing that for years with no problem, right? So I wasn't around, but I know what happened. What would oftentimes do is people would stuff them in at the top, put them into the elevator, and then there would be another person on the lower level waiting for it to come down, and then they would start rolling it out, and you'd go downstairs and meet them. So all this stuff for an entire floor, and more than 100 people easily, had all been stuffed on this one cart, put onto the elevator, and that day the elevator cable snapped. It was frightening as hell because we used to live on that boat too. We used some of the living quarters. I was in my living quarters when the damn thing broke, and it just, it shook the entire boat, ran out. And God, fortunately, the girl who was on the ground who was getting it, she barely had her hand. Ordinarily this thing would come down really, really slow. This time it just snapped. Poof. And she'd been just close enough that the bottom of the thing brushed her arm, and she, got bumped that way. But here's the thing, right? You put all of that stuff into an elevator like that, and the thing snaps at the first floor, drops to the main floor. You don't get pieces of nothing. You get dust. All of that stuff that we had out there to take out on the main floor turned to dust when it dropped. And I'm not kidding. There was nothing left. The silverware that was metal, that was all. That was all that was left. Everything else just dropped and turned to dust. And so that was the other thing that happened with this girl, and we took her to the, straight to the emergency room in the nearest bigger town, because this one didn't have one. But she'd gotten bumped by that thing coming down, which wasn't horrible, but the dust from all the glass dust had flown up and, covered part of her arm, a good chunk of her body, and you couldn't touch her, because we're talking about little tiny fragments, dust, glass dust. So you couldn't touch her. You just had to go, okay, we're just going to take her straight to the ER and figure out, let the doctors figure out how to get this tiny little frankly smaller than sand type of, dust out of this poor girl without, ripping her to shreds, right? It's a bigger deal than it sounds like. So she goes off to the ER, and, we're all worried, but thinking, okay, well, it can't be that bad. It wasn't until she got back that we went, holy crap, you had dust on your body and stuff. Oh my God. And she told us how they got rid of it. It was, anyhow, so she goes off to the ER, and the rest of us look around and go, what in the hell are we going to do? All of our dishes for the entire main floor, 150, 200 people's worth of dishes, just dropped and turned into dust. What the hell are we going to do? Well, this is one of those things where, being in a small town, it was amazing to watch them come together. This theater was a decently big thing in that town, in the summertime anyway. It was a decently big thing in that town, and so everybody came out. Everybody came out. We got some dishes from the college. It was up on this hill. They gave us some dishes. We got dishes from a bar that was nearby. I'm pretty sure that it's been a long time, 89, but I'm pretty sure individuals from that town gave over their dishes and their flatware, their silverware, and all that. And we thought we were going to have to hold the curtain, because we thought there's no way we're going to get this all in there. Nope. Because not only did they give us stuff and say, here, have this for the rest of the summer. Not only did they do that, they helped us set up. We actually got the thing done well before we would ordinarily get it done, because all of these townspeople came out and said, oh my gosh, and they need to pour it on there. So I liked very much seeing that in Superman and Lois. I thought that was real nice. It's one of those things that does really happen in small towns. When stuff happens to people, they tend to help people out more. So good on you, guys at CW, and even Jeff Johns. You may have done something right here. So yay for you. In general, however, it's a good show. It has clearly setting up for next season. I won't necessarily spoil the ending, but if you watch the show to the end, you can see how they're setting up for next season. That's fine. Only other real notes on that are, for God's sake, Clark needs to shave, and they need to do something about his costume. Guys, Superman is a lighthearted adventure character, and now he's moved into the area of family drama. right? Go back and watch Full House. Now, I know they got older fashions, but you're going to find that they wore colorful things. Superman wears blue, like this kind of blue. It isn't this dark, muted to almost purplish blue. It is blue, like this. He has a big red S with a yellow background on his chest. It's not dirty. It's just plain clean. Guys, seriously, do something about the costume to make it bluer, lighter blue, and give Clark a shave, for God's sake. That doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, good show. Can't say enough really good things about it. The stuff that I have to say is relatively nitpicky, and in the one case where, from personal experience, I know how people in small towns deal with disasters and stuff like that. They really do pitch in. So thank you guys at Superman and Lois. You are continuing to do it right from our perspective. Then there is Star Trek Lower Decks. I tell you, with a show like this, I've really only got one major thing that I'm looking for. It's real simple. Is it funny? And to date, this show has not been funny. It's all it is really. It's like fan service. The animated series. You can walk through, and I have to give them I have to give the creators and writers on this a certain level of, pat on the back. I have to hand it to them a little bit, because you can tell with all of these references, because it's reference after reference after reference after reference about this Star Trek, that Star Trek, prior Star Treks. Sometimes they've worked in, interesting ones like an Edoan. A three-legged, three-armed alien that we first saw in Star Trek, the animated series. They had a picture of Kirk and Spock in one instance that was from the Star Trek, the animated series. So I get there's a lot of little references in here, and I have to give it to them. Somebody who's been watching Star Trek has put these scripts together, because all of these little things are accurate. They are correct references. And sometimes they're really small, and you don't see them unless you know Star Trek really well. So I give them that. But the problem is it's just not funny. It's quip after it's rapid fire quip after quip, and reference to other Star Trek, quip, reference Star Trek, and you just like, okay, it's not funny. It's just quips and references to Star Trek. And it unfortunately keeps that here. What really bothers me about it is the woke hate mob side of things. The woke hate mob, of course, that is Star Trek, the modern Star Trek's primary audience. And I don't think they're going to keep it on the air long term, but apparently they've done enough to get that talentless hack fraud, Alex Kurtzman, get his job again. In any case, woke hate mobs are, the target demographic for this. That is the target demographic. Woke hate mobs who act like bullies. So that's their target demographic. And the thing about that target demographic is, if you say something like, and to me this makes perfect sense, you have to say, okay, Lower Decks is no more canonical than Star Trek the Animated Series was canonical, right? I mean, if you're going to go with that being as canon, you're going to wind up, and I think that we actually saw a nod to this in this episode, but there's an episode of Star Trek the Animated Series where they wind up with a big giant Spock that nobody wants to deal with really at the end, and they just kind of go away. Here we have, in this episode, again, it was a little slide right in there. Somebody saw this show. They had a giant Spock skeleton. I'm assuming it was left over from that particular episode. It was just in the background. It was just things they were walking on, but it was there. Again, got to give them credit for, having something like that in there. It's just in the service of something that isn't very funny. And again, the woke hate mobs say, okay, this show is canon. This is part of the canon. This is just as canon as Star Trek The Next Generation. And if you say to them that doesn't make sense, this show is intentionally rather self-referential and rather self-satirical. That's what it does a lot of. They think it's funny. It's not. It's interesting to see, but, it's not very funny. And you can't have this, like Riker, right? A total parody of himself. Clearly, just a total parody. They're taking 2 or 3 things that he's known for and blowing them all out of proportion, and he runs around being, a stiff upper lip and, rock-jawed hero that he was not in Star Trek The Next Generation. And I don't really have a problem with that when you're in a comedy like this. You can go ahead and take liberties and be self-referential, be self-effacing, things like that. I don't have a problem with that. But you can't then say that this makes sense in the universe that was 1966 to 2005, because you can't say that it hooks up with any of the modern Star Trek, the live-action ones. It clearly doesn't have any connection there. So how can you say this totally, satirical, almost parody of Captain Riker is anything like we saw that character in 7 years of the show? We never saw that. You cannot make the argument. And they always do the same thing. The woke hate mob bullies are always the same. I pointed this out in one of the videos where I talked about how the woke argue. They're always the same. They will find some small example of where, like I heard this one. They said, oh, well, look at the Trouble with Tribbles. It's just the same. I'm like, no. Trouble with Tribbles was an unusual episode, okay? It was more funny, more satirical in some ways than other episodes, but it wasn't the only thing they ever made. You cannot look at this and go, look, it's nothing but quips and self-referential stuff, and say, yeah, all of Star Trek was like that because you had Trouble with Tribbles. Doesn't make any sense. When people are saying that, the only thing to reply back with is, you have never seen the show, have you? Because very few of them have. The thing about the woke hate mob bullies is they've never actually watched any other Star Trek. They just want to be bullies about the Star Trek they like. And you can't get them to, be rational about it. That's just impossible. You can't get them to be rational because modern Star Trek is a little bit different from other Star Treks. Modern Star Trek is I think I finally put my finger on it after a long time. Modern Star Trek is very emotionally based. That's why those of us that have been longtime fans of this franchise go, God, they're crying every damn 5 minutes. But it's very emotionally based, and for some reason that resonates with the woke and the hate mobs. And so they feel this, right? In some fashion or another, they feel it in a way that I just can't. Maybe I'm old and jaded. Maybe it's just that. But I can't get invested with these characters because, for me, they're crying all the time about stuff that every other professional space explorer that we have seen in other prior Star Trek to 2005 would never have acted. Or if you're going to get upset, you go and do it after the job is done. You don't sit there and cry in the middle of the job. But woke hate mob fans feel this. So if you say, I think this sucks, right? They're not in a position where all prior Star Treks, you can say, I think Next Gen sucks. And people will go, well, no, I think if you look at this and this, and he'll say, no, I looked at this and this, and I think that sucks. Well, ultimately, you're just like, okay, well, it's personal opinion. You can like something or dislike it, and science fiction fans have always argued about this stuff. I consider myself, as a secret master of fandom, something of a historian of science fiction fandom. And if you look back all the way to when science fiction fandom first became organized in the 1930s, you will see these guys arguing about what's good and what's bad in the written medium, which was the only thing they had then. It has always been this way, guys. We have always complained with each other. Sometimes it gets loud. Sometimes I don't know that it's ever come to blows, but I wouldn't be surprised if it had at some point in the last 90 or so years of fandom. So I look at it and you just go, okay, the reason that they feel so strongly about this is they feel the emotions where I don't. I just can't. They feel the emotions, and so if you have anything negative to say about it, their emotions are such that they feel like it is a personal attack, that it is not something where you're saying, I think, Michael Burnham is a freaking Mary Sue Jesus godlike character who spends a lot of time crying. I don't think she's well written. And they won't take this as a criticism of what it is that they like. They take it as a personal affront. They think it is something that is directed at them, when it's only directed at this show over here that these guys happen to be fans of. We're not going after you guys. We're going after this over here. And if you can't deal with that, well, you're in the wrong fandom, because people have been doing that for 90 years now. They've been doing it for 90 damn years. So that's never going to change. You're just being overly sensitive and, frankly, a bully all the time. Just the way it is. Let's see. Marshall says Tribbles and a piece of the action were the comedic deviants of Star Trek, the original series. Yes. Yeah. But I've heard the argument, oh no, this is totally totally canonical. Despite the fact that this is a comedy show, or at least tries to be, and despite the fact that things happen in it that don't make any sense, they're self-referential or self, intentionally making yourself look bad, but they can't possibly line up. And I don't have a problem with a comedy show like this not being canon. I don't have any problem with that. It's the same thing. I don't have any problem with Star Trek, the animated series, not really being canon. There's stuff in there that just doesn't line up, and that's okay. But to sit there and say, okay, well, I saw a piece of Trouble with Tribbles. I saw a barroom brawl of Trouble with Tribbles, and I've decided that all Star Trek is like that. That's stupid and ridiculous. It says to me, you've never watched it before. Yeah, Marshall says it can be canonical, but also atypical and contradictory. Well, that's what I'm saying. Piece of the action, Trouble with Tribbles, you can still have those as canonical. They're unusual, but if you look at where they fit in the larger scheme of things, they fit fine. But when you get into animated series and Lower Decks, they just don't fit anymore. This is not like, and I can move into that series a little bit, this is not like What If. What If is part of the MCU. And I don't like to talk about these guys very much because they are part of a freaking genocide assisting company, so I don't like to talk about them very much. But I do look at it, and it's a good thing to say about, as a contrast to Star Trek Lower Decks. I think a lot of the people who, when we say, oh, that Lower Decks can't be canonical, they're going, oh, they're trying to hurt me personally, and B, I don't remember. They say, okay, you don't like it because it's animated. No, that's not the case at all. If you look over, for example, at What If. Now, there's a series that is part of the MCU that's showing us alternate universes that, now that they have the multiverse, can diverge away from each other. And I'm perfectly fine with that, being a part of the MCU. I don't have any problem with that. And it doesn't because it's animated. I mean, the Animatrix, right? Which was several largely anime-style Matrix shorts that were done. I don't have any problem with that. It's still in universe, as far as anybody I know ever said. It's part of the canon for Matrix. But it's not a question of the animation. It's just a question of the content. When you look at What If, for better or for worse, you're looking at, things that make sense within the context of that shared universe. So, speaking of What If, off the subject of Lower Decks, because it's not really worth a lot of my time. It would be one thing if it was funny, but it's just not. But over on the What If side, again, not talking about it very much, we've now had 2 episodes of What If. I found them both interesting. I like them fine. It's not my favorite stuff to come out of the MCU, but that's okay. I liked the Captain Carter episode. I thought that was pretty good. There were some things in there that if I'd been doing it, I remember that episode, what really struck me about it was slang. you were hearing a lot of contemporary slang in there that did not exist in World War II. If you're going to do period stuff like this, I think it's important that you go back and you look at the language that was used then. Get rid of modern slang and go for slang that was actually in use then. It's hard for me. It jars me out of the moment as somebody who has been around long enough to watch some of this modern slang come into usage and be able to pinpoint when it started becoming into usage. For example, the word extra. That's a piece of modern slang that is, at least at this point, starting to make its way into 20-somethings, because I'm seeing a lot of people that I watch, reactors that I watch, using the word extra to mean, okay, well, that's a big deal or something like that. It's extra. So if you're going to use that word, and they didn't, it was other stuff, but if you're going to use something like that, modern slang, in a period piece, stop, have somebody go over your script who's a little older, and you can say, no, that's modern slang. No, that's modern slang. For example, there was one where Peggy was, I've forgotten what the exact quote is, but she used words weapons grade. Okay, no, weapons grade it was not a saying until sometime later in the nuclear age, because you had weapons grade plutonium. Plutonium that could be used in a bomb as opposed to plutonium that you wouldn't be using in a bomb for some other purpose. Weapons grade was not something that was even, nobody even thought about at that point. It's something that was associated with the atomic age. There's a lot of little things like that where for me it was just like, wait a minute, hold on, that's modern slang. It wasn't used back then. So if you guys are going to do a period piece, please look that up. I've seen it in other shows. I also tend to be a little bit of a stickler for costuming. Everybody who's watched me very long knows why. I tend to be a little bit more demanding in terms of costuming, but it wasn't particularly violated here, so I don't have any problem with that. The one from last night or the night before, because all of this happens for me in like a 24-hour period. All of these stuff comes out simultaneously. But the one where T'Challa, here we are with the spoiler, guys. The one where T'Challa turned out to be Star-Lord. I thought that was fine. I suppose they're probably going to do T'Challa in animation some, because, of course, they can't do him in live action anymore. I'm really curious what they're going to do with that next Wakanda film without Chadwick Bosewick. In any case, I thought it was okay. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it, per se. You didn't have these problems with language because, of course, you're relatively modern language. But I didn't think it was incredible. It was okay. I've watched some reactors now watch it. And now reactors tend to be very positive about stuff, even if they hate it, with some very few exceptions. But when I watch them and they talk about it, it's like watching somebody who feels obliged to like something, because it is based on a film that was black-led and had a majority black cast that you had to like. And it was a mediocre movie. Black Panther was a mediocre movie. It was an interesting addition into the MCU, but as a movie, mediocre. But people were required to like it back then. I remember I didn't review it because I didn't want to be called a racist if I didn't happen to like it. But people were required to like it. And now Chadwick Boseman has passed away, and so we have another impetus for people to be required to like this. Well, it was okay. It was about average. If you look at it outside of the context of it being a popular but dead star and okay, mediocre movie that you were required to like because of the optics, if you just took that all away, I think you got a okay, animated episode. Not anything that I would jump up and down around. One thing that it does show you, and I get a kick out of this fact, is the MCU is a very, very big and a varied place. we are with these episodes, and I knew that going into it because I knew what the What If book was about, because there's a comic book What If. Does the same things. So I went into that knowing what it was going to be about, so I wasn't shocked, but I find it interesting that in all of these other movies and stuff, and some of them have voiceovers and things, but you get the Watcher here, right? And it's like the beginning of a Twilight Zone episode. You know, you don't have this sort of omniscient narrator in the form of Rod Serling. You have it in the form of the Watcher. I just get a big kick out of that because it's like you can go almost anywhere in this damn universe. And things can be a little bit different for you. I've always wanted to see, because one of their properties is Kid Colt, right? A Western character. It was a Western from the 1950s. One of the properties is that. And in the Peggy Carter TV series, or miniseries, you actually saw a movie being made of a Kid Colt that was produced by Howard Stark. Well, I'd actually like to see them do that movie. Really do a Western in the MCU with Kid Colt. I think that'd be a lot of fun. There's a lot of different branches you can go off to with this universe, and the fact that we have one that sort of comes off like a Twilight Zone episode, I think is a lot of fun. You get down to the content itself, it's okay, but that whole concept of having kind of a Twilight Zone show in the MCU is kind of cool. So I'm not going to talk about What If very much anymore. It's not really worth it. What time do we have here? Okay, we're good. So that's What If. Again, don't really talk about it too much because it is, done by a genocidal mouse. So. The last one I'm going to talk about is Stargirl, which for 2 weeks or 1 week or hell, I don't remember, Superman and Lois did themselves another really bad service by going on another 2 week or so, I've forgotten, hiatus. Guys, you dumbasses, you're running TV. When you're running TV, you need a consistent time slot. You can't have, it's like not streaming where you can put up 5 episodes and go away for a while and put up more 5 episodes. This is broadcast television. For God's sake, get a time slot and stay there so that your viewers know when to tune in. And why am I having to tell this to you, CW? You used to know this before everybody went crazy on streaming. Nothing has changed with broadcast TV. Anyway, Stargirl, which was coming in right before Superman and Lois for a couple of weeks. Stargirl is, so far this season, a lot of fun to watch. It was a lot of fun to watch last season. It's being fun to watch this season. I got a kick out of the first episode where, Courtney looks like she's going nuts, trying to look for evil villains to fight. And Pat's just like, you got to calm down. Trust me, it's going to get bad soon enough. Let's, relax and take the slow times when we've got them, because as a superhero, crap's going to get real at any time. Take what you can get. So I really like that quite a lot. I like who what looks like supervillain or part of the Injustice Society is shaping up to be this year. I was really interested in the fact that they got an actress to do Jade, Green Lantern Alan Scott's daughter, in the Earth 2 pre-crisis continuity. Jade was his daughter. She got her powers not from the power bringer, the Lantern, but by the fact that her father had been around it for so much of his life that it was like burned into her genetics. So, but this way it was also pretty good, where she got hit with the energy of the green battery and so absorbed that. That works. They had her leave, and I can understand that. Dealing with a TV budget again. It is real tough. Even with modern CGI, it is real tough to do a Green Lantern show. You're talking about something where GL can imagine anything and it will come to pass. He can imagine a giant Mack truck, slamming into an alien into a concrete wall. And he can make that happen. That eats your budget pretty damn fast. Having to do that in any realistic way is going to eat your budget pretty quick. Same thing with doing big things on Superman and Lois. You guys don't have more money than God. If you can't do it with the money you've got, then don't do it. So I was going to be real interested to see what happened with Green Lantern, and they have apparently decided, okay, we're going to save on our budget by only having her, this is my guess, come back at the end of the season when we need the muscle. And we've got the budget. Guys, seriously, I'm actually a little bit more dissatisfied with the fact that we're not seeing her anymore. I get that it's a money thing, but Green Lantern's a cool character. The ability to create constructs and your imagination is the limit is a very cool idea. But if you can't do it, don't do it at all. If you don't have the money to do it right, don't do it at all. Interestingly enough, it had never occurred to me because I noticed this last time, and I didn't take the time to look at it because I didn't want to sit in this chair too long. I went to take a look at it, and I don't have to guess at the location of Blue Valley, Nebraska, because it's exactly located. I'm going to take some time before next week, and I'm going to sit down and figure out precisely where that is, because it's right on the map. It's no question where it's at, but I want to figure out where it's at. They've got a lot of trees around there that we don't usually have in Nebraska. So I'm crossing my fingers that maybe where they've located it is somewhere where there's a lot of trees and stuff. Nebraska is a natural prairie. It is flatter than flat. And generally speaking, the foliage you see is grass for as far as the eye can see in any horizon. There are some little things that they're getting right, both on this show and Superman and Lois. And that is little things like the schools. You know, if you go out to the East Coast, or West Coast rather, it's so warm out there that their school room doors, like for classroom doors, open up to outside. And that's how people get from one classroom to the other. You can't do that here. It gets too cold. It gets too hot. You it's all indoors. So that's what I've been seeing. Good on you, those of you who are doing the set design and stuff for these shows, that you know that you live in an unusual area. Everybody else has indoor schools. So thank you for doing that. You're also continuing, as always, to be very, very kind to us. I am not hearing weird Southern accents that Nebraskans do not have. The people that you've got are not stupid. As always, I must tip a hat to that, because for so long, people in my part of the country have been kicked, and we really hate it. And the fact that you guys are being nice to us, please keep doing it. We will love you forever. So thank you for that. Anyway, they've got the gang coming back, and some of them new coming together for Stargirl. We're shaping up to look like it's going to be a pretty good season so far, only 2 episodes in. And they continue to be nice to us. So, be cool, guys. I have to give, for Stargirl, I have to give Jeff Johns, he actually created this character in the comics. So, doing it right here. What can I say, dude? I'd get rid of you for everything else that your name on is, but you're doing okay here. So that's pretty much all I have to say about those shows. As always, want to get in some free PR for my second channel. If you don't know, and you should if you follow me on social media, I have a second channel where I'm largely doing experimental stuff. I'm taking clips and things, or in the case of one of them, entire episodes of things that have pretty good prints, but are stuck at a lower resolution, like CD or DVD or worse in some cases, and bringing those up to a much higher resolution and a much faster frame rate. The higher resolution will give you more detail, and the faster frame rate means that people's movements look a little more smooth. It's the difference between a 60 frame per second video game and a 24 frame per second TV show. Right? It's just everything looks a little more smooth. So I've done that quite a lot. Some of the stuff I'm having a hard time getting up without running into copyright problems. I have things like clips from Star Trek The Motion Picture, clips from Superman and stuff like that, and some of those I'm having trouble with. But it'll come out as time goes on. In this particular case, this week, I came out, actually in the last 2 weeks since I've been out, I came out with a number of videos. I was at one point, I'm a bit of a Francophile. I always have been, learned the language when I was in 5th grade, and always kind of have been. And there has been pictures and videos of the French saying, we have had enough about this damned virus and everything you're making us do. I've been watching it from time to time. Sadly, I have to say, the French are actually schooling the United States in freedom. You don't let this stuff, you don't take it sitting down, cowards in New York City. You do something about it. And in their case, they've had massive, massive rallies at multiple cities. These are coming on the heels of a lot of other demonstrations for other reasons. But they got this one. They are schooling the United States. It's unfortunate, but you got to realize it's true. So one of the things I like about the French is they have, compared to a lot of other national anthems, they have a very unusual one. You know, most national anthems, like, you know, the Star Spangled Banner, it's about the flag. It's very big. It's, you know, bombastic in places. If you go to, like, you know, God Save the Queen in Britain, you find them saying things like, make our queen great so she can rule over us, you know, well. You know, that's their thing, and it's all very pomp and circumstance sounding. Most national anthems are like that. They tend to be big and about things and, you know, big ideas and stuff like that. The French national anthem, the French national anthem came out. They put that to paper at the French Revolution, and that was incredibly bloody revolution. Read some history on it. Look at some videos about the French Revolution on YouTube. You will be stunned if you don't know about it. That was incredibly bloody. The number of people who got their heads chopped off with a guillotine is astonishing. So the French have, and that's why their current leaders are a little bit worried, because the French have this history of being really horrifying when they need to be. And you see it, it's one of the things I get a kick about, you see it in their national anthem. The words of their national anthem, translation mine, is let's go, children of the fatherland. The day of glory has arrived. Before us lies tyranny. The bloody flag is raised. The bloody flag is raised. Let's go, citizens. Let's form our battalions. No, wait, I'm sorry. Let's see. Do you hear in the fields, that's the next one, do you hear in the fields the roar of the ferocious soldiers? They are coming right into our arms to cut the throats of our sons and female companions, daughters, wives. To arms, citizens, form your battalions. Let's march until the impure blood waters our fields. That is the first verse of the French national anthem, and believe it or not, it actually gets worse. They talk about, in that national anthem, talk about exactly what they're going to do with people on the other side, and it ain't pretty. They finally had to throw in, many years later, another verse that's a little bit more conciliatory. But that's what the French national anthem is. So, me being me, and seeing how this was, you know, coming out on social media, how we were seeing all these pictures of the French schooling us, I went out and I grabbed a clip from one of my favorite movies, Casablanca, starring Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. Great film. If you haven't seen it, go see it. If you're a reactor, react to it. Very few reactors have. I get a kick out of watching modern viewers look at those, because I can't pay my freaking millennial children to watch anything that's in black and white. Unfortunately, because there's a lot of great movies made in black and white. But if you're a reactor, watch that. I'd be very curious. I'm always curious to see how those old movies that are considered classics and should never be remade, Warner Brothers, how they stand up to modern eyes. So, anyway, there's a great scene in Casablanca where there's some Germans in Rick's Cafe who are singing the German national anthem. And they've got piano player with them and just kind of going along with it. There is one shot that I want to mention because I find it really powerful. There's a girl, I've forgotten her name, but she's kind of portrayed as both kind of a slut and somebody who will collaborate with the enemy provided that they get something for it. And that happened. Somebody who did that would not get a time of day from somebody on the street, more likely to be spit upon than anything else. So here's this girl who has been kind of set up as kind of easy, somebody who will go along with the enemy. And she's sitting in a booth across from a German soldier who she's with. So she's, let me see. I don't remember. Here. She's here. German soldier is across from her here. She is nursing her drink, right? She's not happy because right in front of them are the Germans singing the German national anthem. And the officers that he's with is joining in. And she is nursing this drink because she's one of the French who escaped, I think. And she's not happy at all. But by the same token, she's somebody that we've seen before, kind of a slut, somebody who would do this sort of thing. So they're sitting there, and they're singing the German national anthem, and the main hero of the film, besides Bogey, who's I've forgotten what country he's from, but he was in a concentration camp for a while, knows everything about the underground movements that were in all of these countries, and he's a French patriot, and he isn't having any of it. So the German guys are singing their thing. He comes and says to the band to play La Marseillaise, which is the French national anthem, La Marseillaise. He says, play La Marseillaise. The people at the band look over to Rick and Bogey, and he says, just shakes his head once. And so they start singing it. Well, everybody in that cafe was in some fashion or another an expatriate French person or some people who, sided with the French. And so what happened was in that scene, everybody in the bar stands up and starts singing La Marseillaise, completely drowning out the Nazis and pissing them off. As a consequence, the next thing that happens in the film is the Nazis order Rick's Cafe shut down on the basis of if this French patriot can do this to a group of people in a frickin' nightclub somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, which is where this was, this guy is real dangerous. Shut down this establishment and, like that. But the one that always really impresses me, because in that scene, by the way, there's a lot of people in that scene who are actual expatriate French, people from Europe who actually fled that war. And so they populated them because this movie was made during World War II. Nobody knew who was going to win. So they popped all these people into this scene who would really go at it because they felt it. This feeling of being completely, having escaped from a country they loved and all that. So there's this little bit with this woman, as I say, starts out in this scene not very happy with herself, nursing this drink, kind of throwing it back because she's with this German and she really can't stand it, but she feels like she hasn't got any other choice. And so right in the middle of that, in the verse where they're singing, do you hear the ferocious soldiers, the roar of the ferocious soldiers? They're coming right into our arms. And for that particular piece of thing, they pointed it on this girl. And it is really, really, really subtle and really nice moment because you can see in her head that she's realizing that line applies very literally to her. And by the end of the thing, you know that she's given up on this. She's going to kick this German officer to the curb because she's at the end, Vive la France, vive la liberté, very neat little tiny thing. I always like to point that sucker out. It's a really nice little moment. So go over there and have a look at the La Marseillaise from the Casablanca in, I think it's 4K and 48 frames per second. So go have a look at that. Other stuff that came up in the weeks since I was on was Superman, the Fleischer Superman cartoons, Episode 7, Electric Earthquake. As always, there are links to all of these and the channel itself in my description box below. Electric Earthquake is kind of notable because, it's Superman versus a mad scientist who, in this case, has figured out a way to start earthquakes using electric things shoved into the ground under the sea. But anyway, this person, we've had a couple of mad scientists on this series before, neither of whom were Luthor, although there was some, similarities in places. This one's a little bit more off the beaten path, so to speak. This mad scientist is actually an American Indian. He's Native American. Now, the reason that this is in any way interesting is because at that time and in that place, American Indians were generally bad guys in Westerns. They weren't portrayed, they were portrayed to some extent as savages, as people who were, the enemy to be fought and killed in many, many instances. Even if you looked at probably the most popular radio series of that era, The Lone Ranger, well, even Tonto was portrayed as being semi-literate and a little bit slower than the Ranger, which is weird if you really think about it. I mean, there's an Indian who's been around white people his entire life. He's going around with a white guy. Why hasn't he learned normal English? And it was just because that's how Native Americans were treated. But if you watch this cartoon, he is treated perfectly rationally. Yes, he wants something that he will never be able to get. It's ridiculous. He'll never get it. But once you get past that, this is a guy who really could be interchangeable with any other mad scientist we might see in this. The fact that he is Native American is only a way to get into the plot. But he's very lucid. He's clearly very cogent. He's not a backwards Indian. He doesn't have feathers in his hair or anything like that. He's got his hair slicked back and a little longer. But that's about it. If you look at it, it's actually fairly progressive for its era. It's putting a Native American into a place where, sure, he's a criminal mad scientist, but he's a mad scientist. He's intelligent, so it's a good one to watch. Also, I put up this last week Star Trek, the original series, Season 2, opening titles. I took the Star Trek remastered version of this, because that's in a good resolution and it works well for this anyway. I took the Star Trek remastered one of this, turned it into 4K with 48 frames per second, and I got to say, the results are pretty nice. It's nothing you haven't seen before in terms of the opening titles, but it's much smoother and much higher resolution than you'll find anywhere else. Finally, the last thing I put up was on Tuesday after the Superman and Lois episode. I put up Superman Episode 3 from the Fleischer cartoons, Volcano. Link to that in my description box. Volcano's interesting because, with most plots, if you look at classically what most plots are about, is one of three things: man versus man, that is, me versus some other person; man versus nature, something natural is happening that we have to fight; and man versus himself, an internal struggle of some kind. Those are the three types of stories that are very, very consistent throughout human history. And it's real noticeable when you get into Superman cartoons like this. Man versus man, okay. Oftentimes that's like versus a mad scientist or something like that, or bank robber, somebody trying to steal all the gold from the $1 Billion Limited, things like that. So you have man versus man in that respect. Then you have the man versus himself, which doesn't really come up very much in these. There's not enough characterization for that to really be much of an issue. But the other one, you see a lot with Superman, is man versus nature. Something is happening with nature that has to be, fixed or something. And so that's what this episode is. It is a man versus nature. Volcano is real straightforward. There's a volcano that's going to erupt, and Superman has to save the city from the eruption. Real fun thing if you watch that. This is one of those episodes that has had homages done to it. One of the homages here for this one is the way that Superman deals with the eruption, right? So, okay, the volcano itself is not symmetrical. There's one lip of the volcano that's much higher than the lower lip. So the problem is it's all going to come out of the lower lip. It's going to go down and destroy a coastal city. So the way that he takes care of this, at one point, the molten lava, the lava is going down the hill and going into a depression, and it's slowly raising up, so you get some nice suspense, slowly going up to the top of the rocks in this depression where it's going to go off. But no, Superman does a thing where he pushes a giant rock. Well, actually, in that case, he throws some dynamite that causes a rock slide that causes the lava to stop. Well, if you watch Superman from 1978, you'll see the exact same thing when dealing with the water from the Hoover Dam. You always got to look for this stuff. There's usually, if you got a good showrunner or something, you'll see stuff like this all the time. The other part of that is, and this was true with the previous one too, in modern times, Superman is frankly very overpowered. There's very little that can stop him, kryptonite and a couple of other things. But in a golden age like this, Superman was not nearly that overpowered. He got that way by the Silver Age, but not in the Golden Age. So in both of the last two ones that I uploaded, you can see this in action. In one, Superman clearly cannot hold his breath underwater forever. And in the other, it's certainly implied that Superman can be killed by molten lava. You never see it actually touch him. You see him get out of the way of it. So, check my time here. It is 10:52. That is about as long as I can deal with sitting in this chair. That's over on the Darkroom. Go have a look. Individual links to the various videos in my description box below here, and a link to the channel itself where you can go and like, sub, and hit the notification bell. Same as here, because that's about all the time that I have for that. I would certainly love to keep the conversation going, so please leave your comments, your questions, and your nasty remarks. I'll do my best to respond to you. So, as always, please do like, sub, hit the notification bell, and share me on social media, because that is the way that I grow. Yep, thank you, Marshall. Good show, thank you. And give me back some rest. Oh, trust me. Third on my list of things to do. First is to shut down the studio, and then, straight back to where I'm semi-vertical. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. And again, do like, sub, hit the notification bell, and go to my second channel and like all those videos. Sub so you get notified, because that is the way that I grow. So thanks for watching this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch Live. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.